Welcome back to Guitar Solo Dojo. Jason Moore here. Today we're dropping the big loud amps and all the distortion, and we're going to cut down to some basics and some fun stuff, some fingerpicking, starter fingerpicking songs if you like. They're not the most complicated things. They're very approachable, most of them, and they mostly follow patterns. And that's a lot of what goes on in fingerstyle stuff. Patterns, right-hand patterns mainly. And so these are pretty good examples of these. We have Landslide, Dust in the Wind, More Than Words, Never Going Back Again, and Hey There Delilah today. And I'm using actually a PRS telly, the Miles Kennedy telly here, plugged in through my neural quad cortex using the acoustic simulator on that. Basically because it's easier than using an acoustic guitar for this recording. So it sounds pretty cool. You can let me know what you think in the comments. You know, it's not super authentic, but it gets the job done anyway. So listen up, have some fun, and I will have some transcriptions linked in the description part of the page there, and you can check that out if you don't already know the songs. And some of these we're going to maybe paraphrase a little bit or twist just a little bit to make it more digestible, but for the most part they're going to be pretty much like the record. So listen up and have some fun. Okay, starting with the most approachable, I think, out of the bunch here, and this is Landslide by Fleetwood Mac. Awesome tune and sort of an entry level to Travis picking, what's called Travis picking. So for me, I like using a thumb pick. I got these really cool thumb picks, Black Mountain thumb picks that the great Brent Mason country picker turned me on to. So these are really, really fantastic. You can use these as a regular thumb pick. They're spring-loaded, and you can alternate pick with them. This isn't sponsored, by the way. I just really like the thumb pick. So anyway, you should check these things out if you're interested in using the thumb pick. Before we get started on that and why I use a thumb pick, it just helps bring out the bass tones a little bit more. I played a lot of classical in college, and I would grow all the fingernails out to try to get that. And when you do this on a steel string, it's much more complicated, and you end up shredding your fingernails, and you have to glue on fake fingernails and things like that, which I don't really want to do. So I like using a thumb pick to help those bass notes ring out. They usually need the most help. So anyway, that's it. You don't have to. Just find the edge of the thumb, the soft part of the thumb doesn't give me the pop that I need out of those bass notes. So that being said, some real simple ideas to start with, okay? When you're finger picking from a classical approach, which not everybody's doing a classical approach, and you don't have to, but this is just some place you can start with. We basically we use our thumb, index, middle, and ring finger, and some flamenco kind of style stuff. You might use your pinky as well. We're not going to do that here. We're just going to go make a string assignments first with our right hand. So for the right hand, on the thumb, it's going to be covering the low E, the A, and the D string. And you use your index finger on the G string. The B string is going to be your middle finger, and the high E string will be your ring finger. Now, that's just a starting point. It's not a hard, fast rule that you can't use one of the other fingers to hit those other strings. I do it all the time. People do it all the time. And whether you're playing classical or any style, sometimes it's just necessary, and it makes a whole lot more sense. But to get things going, it's a good frame of reference, okay? So you can just start with that. I don't want to go too deep into that. That'll be a different video. Maybe there's something out there that you've already seen. But you could just start by doing that. A couple things, though, you might want to be aware of. As you start finger picking, and I've got a capo at the 3rd fret because the first one we're doing is Landslide, and I think it has a capo on the 3rd fret. So we're just going to hold down, say, a C chord. As I'm strumming the chords or picking the chords with these fingers, if I kind of have my hand sort of parallel with the strings like this, parallel and perpendicular. Anyway, if I have a parallel with the strings like you might normally have your hand, you have one of two choices here when you pick the string. I can go straight across the string by rotating my wrist, which I don't want, or I can just naturally hinge the finger, which gives me that, which I also don't want. So it's best to try to maybe angle your hand this way a little bit. Now in classical, you end up switching legs, you have the guitar hanging like this, and ergonomically it works out very well. But realistically, we're probably not going to be doing that. So we're going to keep it more like this. And I just rotate my hand over like this. Once again, just once in a while, as you're doing this, doesn't necessarily feel natural. And you have this cutaway in your guitar typically, right? So on an electric guitar, if you're using an acoustic, obviously different thing. But if you're coming down from this angle like you would normally be, you might bring your hand up just a little bit higher to help ease that angle a little bit. Otherwise, you have to take your wrist and bend it, which doesn't feel all that comfortable. So anyway, now we got our thumb, 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 index, middle, ring. Let's look at landslide. Landslide is a very, very, like I said, entry-level sort of finger-picking tune that first kind of explores what's called Travis picking. Kind of came from Merle Travis, and the idea is, the way I like to break it down for simplicity's sake, in this case, and this is all fluid, okay? There's nothing set in stone as you start this idea, but I like to think of it as picking 4 strings. Okay, and a really, really basic way to start doing this idea of Travis picking is no matter what the 4 strings are, they could be your low E, A, D, G, or we could say it's low E, and then we could skip to the G, then the B, then the high E, whatever it is, we're going to just pick 4 basic strings here. And with that, we're going to alternate, okay? And so these 2 low strings, which oriented on the guitar, they're going to be the deeper strings, will be covered with your thumb. And then we can use your index on the next string and maybe your middle on this string. Okay, give you an example on the guitar. If I'm holding down, say, a G chord, okay, of course, capo with the 3rd fret. So I might pick the low E string, the D, the G, and the B string. So my thumb is going to get the low E string, the D, and then my index finger is going to get the G, and my middle finger will get the B. And what we're going to do is we're going to rotate from thumb, index, and then thumb, middle. Okay, so, and that thumb is going to be jumping from string to string. So it looks like this. If I just do the thumb, it'll be. And then I'm going to add in, between the first thumb strike, I'm going to add in the index finger, and between the next one, I'm going to add in the middle finger. So. Okay, so that's the basic idea. And you can take any chord and do that with it. I can change, once again, which strings I want to do. I can say, okay, I'm going to do the low E, and I'll do the A string, and then maybe the G and the B. All that means is now I'm just going to be rotating with the thumb between these 2 strings. Then I'll still add in the index in the middle. Things get a lot more complicated than that, of course, and what I was saying before about it being fluid means even within the same song, you can change which 4 strings you're using. So I can maybe go. Just to change things up. But the idea is each one of these phrases can be just a very simple 4-note pattern. And that's sort of the basics of Travis picking. And of course, once again, I want to make this crystal clear, is that it gets way more interesting and way more complicated than that if you want it to be. It could be as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. And since we're starting off on our finger-picking journey here, this is a good place to start. So enough of that. On with actual landslide here. Landslide is basically 3 chords, okay, for the main riff anyway. So we have a C, and we have what's called a G over B. Okay, and so if you don't know what that G over B means, or G/B, you might see it written in music, is that it's a G chord, but the lowest note, instead of being a G, is very specifically a B in this case. And of course, this is all relative to the capo, so that G and the B part only makes sense when I'm playing open, but it still looks like a G over B. So we have this C, G over B, A minor 7, which sounds fancy, but it's just an A minor without the ring finger, and then back to the G over B. Now, there's a particular way this is played, and we can modify that too, just to make it more of a practice piece as well. But what he does is, now, you can get more mileage out of that just as a practice piece, like I said, to really practice the Travis picking by completing the cycle. And you notice it's da 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 da. So we've got all these 16th notes and then an 8th note at the end of each phrase. You can just sort of fill in the gaps and add in the extra 16th note, maybe like this. So I'm just kind of completing out the phrases just to make it more interesting to play maybe, or if you just like the way it sounds, it's okay. It won't hurt anybody's feelings if you add that note in. And as you do things like that, though, you have to incorporate also what are called passing tones and efficient ways to move from one chord to the next. These aren't very complicated chords, but if you don't approach them the right way or you don't recognize certain things that you can do, it can make it more choppy, right? So if I'm going from the C to the G over B, what I really want to focus on here is getting that note down first, and then I can add in that pinky later. So then when I'm going from the G over the B to the A minor 7, the first two notes I play are open. Okay, so I actually don't need to have anything down right away, which helps make it nice and smooth. So I'm going to leave my hand off the guitar until I absolutely need it. So I go from here. Then when I go back to the G over B, I get that second finger down first, and then let the pinky come down afterwards. So those are some little tips to help you get through that. I don't think it's going to be crazy difficult for you, but what you should do first is just play the chords. Get used to playing the chords back and forth, so you take care of that part of it first. We try to remove all the variables out of these equations, or as many as we can, one at a time, so you're not stuck thinking about and worrying about more than one thing at the same time. So if I just do this, if I get that sequence down, then all I have to worry about is my right hand, which is a very consistent picking pattern. Next in line, we have Dust in the Wind. Dust in the Wind is also a Travis picking, kind of like Landslide, with a little bit more going on. And an interesting way of approaching the Travis picking, not crazy, but just kind of a little interesting touch put on it. And as we talked about in Landslide, we're just basically going thumb. In that case, it was thumb, index, thumb, middle. You can use your ring too, or whatever. It depends on what strings you're playing and a couple other things, but really, it doesn't really matter that much on this. Probably your thumb, index, and middle are the best way to go. So for Dust in the Wind, we have the same basic idea of we're going rotating back and forth or alternating between thumb, index, thumb, middle. But in the first part, that concept anyways, not necessarily that order. So in the first part, starting from a C, in this case, we hit two strings at the same time. Okay. So what's happening is, instead of separating those two notes, in this case the thumb and the middle, just hitting them together. Okay? And then we do the thumb index. Then the next time we play the thumb and the middle, they're separated. And then back to the thumb and the index. So the only difference between, there's basically two halves. We have half number 1 and half number 2. Okay? And the only thing different is that in the first half of this basic riff, that the thumb and the middle are playing at the same time. The next time they're separated. If you keep that in mind, it makes this a whole lot easier to take on. And once you get that basic picking pattern, it doesn't change really much at all throughout the entire song. So if you can work that out, you're kind of dialed in. You just have to work out the left hand now. So breaking down this intro, it's really basically two chords. Not basically, it's just two chords. And there's some modifications under those chords while you hold them down. A C and an A minor. And This is weird to explain, but very simple once you actually apply the idea. So we start with the C chord. Okay, and what's happening when you hear this line, the melody of that line is created by a changing note. The B string is constantly changing each time you do the picking cycle. So it goes from here it's the same exact sequence, okay, which gets kind of confusing because it's a 3-note sequence, but you play each thing 4 times, each chord 4 times through the pattern. So it sounds like it's more complicated than it really is, but it starts from the 1st fret. It just goes 1 and then 0 and then 3, 1, 0, 3, 1, 0, 3, 1, 0. Okay, and so for the C chord, it goes 1, 0, 3, 1. So since we ended on a 1, the A minor part, it's technically not going to be an A minor, but the A minor is going to start without the index finger, so it's going to start from a 0, and then it'll go 3, 1, 0. So it looks like this. And we ended on the open, so we're going to start the C again with the pinky on the 3rd. For the final little part of that intro, we go back to the A minor, this time starting from the 1st fret on the B string. And that's it for the intro. Okay, so if you keep this in mind, we're just going. Just rotating between those 2 chords. It's kind of weird to do it without actually playing the song, but that's all that's happening on that left hand. So you get a lot of cool sounds out of it for very little movement on the left hand. And the rest of the song, as you get into the verse, it's all utilizing the same basic picking pattern. So once again, you get that picking pattern dialed in, and you're pretty much set for the rest of the song. You just, of course, have to add in that little detail of the left hand. So have fun. So next on the list, deviating from this Travis picking thing, this is really just kind of a boom chug kind of a feel. So it's just basically a twist on that kind of a vibe. And in this case, I don't know how he does it exactly. He's probably using finger picking. Once again, I still have the thumb pick on here. And I'm just going to break this down really, really quickly. So we have basically D chord, starting with a D chord. But you don't really need to hold down the whole D because you're not going to hit that high E string. So we can just, here's how I would do it personally. I would say 1st finger on the 2nd fret of the G, and then 2nd finger on the 3rd fret of the B, because that's going to set you up for what's coming next. So we have this D chord, and we're just alternating between thumb on the D, and then we hit the G and the B at the same time with the index and the middle respectively. So we're not saying to do both with both fingers. It's the index fingers assigned to the G and the middle fingers assigned to the B. So it looks like this. Okay, so now there's several different ways you could get to the next chord. How I think works pretty well for most people is just flattening out that 1st finger to hold down the 2nd fret on the G and the 2nd fret on the B, and then I grab the 4th fret on the D string with my pinky. Now, what this amounts to is just an F sharp minor chord, but a much simpler version of an F sharp minor chord. Now, I have had plenty of people learn this and have difficulty with this bar and getting that pinky out of the way, so sometimes they'll use their 1st and 2nd fingers here and then add the pinky. Now, the one potential benefit from that is that you can just leave your second finger on that string, on the B string, and just slide it back and forth so it looked like this. That's more complicated than I like to make it. I just like to bar it and it works great. And you could still leave this first finger barred there the whole time, even while you have your second finger down, then you just have to let your second finger off. The next section goes from a B minor to a G to an A, back to that B minor, and to an A. I'm adding this little note because he adds the note in the song. It's just the 5th fret on the B string, which is still part of an A chord. It doesn't change the tonality of the chord. Still just part of the chord. It's just a different voicing of the chord, right? So when we say we're going to do a B minor, that doesn't mean we're responsible for holding down the entire B minor, which actually you don't want to do because it's unnecessary and it makes things more difficult than they should be. So for this B minor, how I'm doing it, I would take basically a regular B minor chord, except I'm not going to bar it, okay? And I'm going to remove my 3rd finger because it's not needed. So then I'm going to take that off there, and I'm not barring anything. I've got my 1st finger on the 2nd fret of the A string, my pinky on the 4th fret of the G, and my 2nd finger on the 3rd fret of the B, and I just got this. Has that one little open A passing tone. Then it goes to this G. Now, this G, I think he does it that way, but you could also just play these 2 strings, the G and the B string, open, and it would work great because it's also G. Right? But I think this is kind of cool just to transition over here because you get this B minor and a really simple transition to a G. Now, if you're struggling to see how this is a G chord, if you just do a G bar chord from the 3rd fret, you'll see it's just the notes on the low E, the G, and the B string, which leaves you with that. So here's what it looks like. Then we get to the A, and even though we would normally might see an A like that, we're just doing the G and the B string again, and just barring with the 1st finger. Then you repeat that whole phrase. Actually, not the whole phrase, just the beginning of it. Then you go to the A, then add that pinky to the 5th fret of the B, and you've got the basic riff. So. Anyway, super cool tune, pretty fun to play. Hope that works for you. Next on the list, yet another departure. Very, very different kind of style. I'm going to lose the thumb pick for this one because it's just unnecessary. This is More Than Words from Extreme. And for me, I think I don't know when that album came out, somewhere around 1990 or something like that, off of Pornograffiti. Awesome album. And this song was the one that got the radio play to put them on the map, sort of, for that record. But if you haven't heard that record, listen to the whole record. It's pretty sweet. Anyway, so this one, for me, was my first experience sort of listening to acoustic and having the slap style, which doesn't translate as well on the electric guitar, but I'm sticking to my electric guitar guns here, and we're going to try it on this thing anyway. So once again, like a lot of these things, so much of the work is done in the right hand, and the left hand is actually not doing a whole lot, okay? So when we break down this riff, first of all, the basic technique is we've got this. Okay, we've got these cool string slaps, and they sound a little bit different on the acoustic guitar. But what I do is, I guess the way it might be done for most people or something. I don't know. But everybody might do it a different way. But here's what I would do to do it. So I get this chord, and I'm just playing the bass note, the low E string, with the thumb, and then I've got my index, middle, and ring on their respective strings, in this case for a G chord. And so the basic idea to start here is I hit the bass note, then pick all those 3 strings with individual fingers, okay? And you strum those together, so it's not, he does do that, he'll strum it with the index finger for different things, but not right here. So we get this, and then we get the slap. Okay, so what I do, I try to get those fingernails to slap against the string to give it a little bit of percussive sound to it, okay? If you just touch it, you don't get a whole lot. You'll get a sound, but not the effect that you're probably looking for. So line them up, and as I'm doing this slap, I'm trying to keep the fingers close to where they're going to be strumming next, which might seem like a lot to think about, but it doesn't take long to train your fingers to do it. So we look like this. And then we get to the next, not really chord, the next part of the riff. And I say it's not the next chord because it's the same chord, just a G, but this time with a B in the bass. We saw that in Landslide, another G over B, so it looks like this. Now, this is where he does do the little index finger strum. So he goes like this. So we're hitting these strings here, 2 or 3 strings. It really doesn't matter. You could hit 1 string if you really wanted to. It doesn't really matter. It won't change the harmony of what's going on. Hit a couple strings though, it'll sound fine. If you happen to hit 3, great. You're not going to be at risk of hitting anything that sounds horrible unless you're holding down a really horrible note. Other than that, if you're just holding down a basic G, it should sound just fine. So we've got our basic movement here. And then after getting to that, we just go to a C add 9, okay? So only difference here is I don't need to have the full C add 9 held down. So in other words, I don't need my first finger on the 2nd fret of the D string. I do want my 2nd finger over to the 3rd fret of the A string though. So I'm just making this movement here. So it goes from the G to the G over B to the C add 9. So far we have this. And of course we have that little deviation, okay? And then it goes to an A minor. Once again, utilizing that index finger. Watch this video very carefully on that stuff because that's one of the tricks about this tune. And every time I notate it, it's kind of busy on the parts just to indicate where that strum is coming in. But if you just watch it, you'll probably get the idea. So once again, go to the A minor. Then we add in this little G at the top of it here, which makes it the A minor 7. Then right to a C. And then back to the G chord. So here's what it looks like. Anyway, there's a lot more to the song, but all utilizes the basic same right hand picking technique. So anyway, I will have a transcription for that, just like all the other stuff, so that might help as well. But watching the video and when those index finger strums is going to be a big help. Okay, final one of the day today. Never going back again. Lindsey Buckingham, Fleetwood Mac. This by far is going to be the most challenging one, in my opinion, on this list today. It is not a simple one, and to get it to sound really, really good, you have to spend some serious time learning how to separate those bass tones from the treble tones. and it is not that easy. He plays it very, very well on the record. So anyway, so some basic things. This is also another sort of Travis picking with a lot more color going on with this thing. So if we look at this, we've got this basic alternating line with the thumb, where I'm going back and forth between, well, the D, or the low E, then the D, then the A, then the D. So I get. So we get this really cool thing. And to start it, we just start barring at, everything relative to the capo here, okay? So I have the capo at the 4th fret. So obviously when I say 1st fret, it's actually going to be right there, and 2nd fret's going to be right there. And I will also refer to the chords relative to the capo, assuming it's open, basically. So what we're doing is we're holding down this basic A chord, okay, with the 1st finger. So we get this idea. We have the A held down there, and then we're going to add in sort of, you can think of it as a suspension. You can think of this as a D over A, whatever you want to think of. But I'm going to add the 3rd finger onto the 4th fret of the D string and the 2nd finger onto the 3rd fret of the B string. So I get this. That's my first bit. And that's my thumb going, okay? And then the thumb's going to hit the open A. I let off these 2 fingers and then hammer them back on again. So now this one, and this is just that thumb going again. These things are really weird to play out of context, but that's what's happening. So we've just got this, once again, the thumb is key in this one. And this is especially one that I would like to use a thumb pick for. Just to give you an example, if I take the thumb pick off, it just doesn't have the oomph to it. And especially when I'm playing the electric guitar, you have to dig in really hard to get those things to ring out, or even a lighter gauge string on the acoustic. So that thumb pick really brings them up to life. And this is where we get the first interesting bit here. Okay, and we just bring up this 3rd finger to the 5th fret of the D and pinky on the 5th fret of the B. And if you listen to the record, there's this little slide, okay? And that probably will happen naturally. So if you look at a transcription and you see that little slide there, you probably don't have to stress about it. And if you try to make it sound too much like a slide, it'll probably be counterproductive because it'll happen as an incidental slide anyway. So as you work your way back down to this chord. Now, the next little bit of this intro phrase is what I find to be the trickiest part to keep sounding clean, because we've got the ring, the middle, and the index finger doing this. Okay, it's doing a 3-note pattern while the bass note is cycling every 2 notes. So sorry. Okay, now the trick is that these fingers, the thumb isn't always lining up in the same spot that it would, because once again, you're hitting 3 notes with the ring, middle, and index, and only 2 notes over here, so it looks like this. Now, how I tried to work that out was I forgot about the rest of the song. I just started this. Make sure I know what's going on there so I know what to listen for, and then did this. And then you combine them together, but for every 2 notes you hit with the fingers, you're going to hit 1 note with the thumb. Okay, it's kind of weird to do slow, but as we go. Okay, weird little part, but just sit here and do this over and over again. Just over and over again till you get comfortable with that idea. That way, when you have to put it in the middle of a song, it might feel a little bit more natural. Like I said, that one's gonna be a lot more challenging. So if you just get this, which is basically the first measure of it, that's actually a really, really good start. Nice and slow. Just over and over and over again. That is an excellent way to sort of get your feet on the ground for this tune. So, I hope you had fun on these acoustic tunes. Hopefully it gets you going on that finger style stuff. Try it with, without a thumb pick. There's other great thumb picks out there. This one, like I said, I really, really like because I can alternate pick with it, and it feels very, very natural. It feels much more like a flat pick like I would have, and I can go back and forth on it. So, enjoy. Have a good time.